Morning, everyone. I found this Finnish mythology little short story on Fanfiction, and it's called Tuonela by Floranna. And I thought it was kind of interesting, so I thought I'd read it out loud. It was published on February 1st, 2015, and it's got about 2,000 words, so I just, thought I'd read it out loud. So the description of the story is: the river was as black as the songs in the stories said, and she could feel the coldness from the white water seep into her skin and make her shiver as badly as standing outside in midwinter. So I found that kind of interesting, so I clicked on it. So here goes. Okay. Author's note. Some of the italicized parts were taken from Calavera. Can't talk today. Kalevala, translated to English by Keith Bosley, published by Oxford University Press. Alright, that's the end of author's note. Chapter 1. Well, beginning of the novel, of the short story. Alright, here goes. Minerva walked towards the river and stopped to breathe. She had been walking for several days through the thick woods and inhospitable lands to get here, but the most dangerous part was still ahead. The river was as black as the songs and stories had said, and she could feel the coldness from the white water seep into her skin, and make her shiver as badly as standing outside in midwinter. She couldn't quite see what was on the other side of the river, but knew for sure there was Tuonela, the land of the dead. The air felt still, even here, and she couldn't hear any sounds of animals or birds. Even the river was soundless in a way that was clearly unnatural. She took a deep breath and started stripping. Her outer clothes were too valuable for this part of the trip, and she wouldn't most likely need shoes at Tuonela anyway. When she only had her undershirt When she only had her undershirt and skirt on, she opened her bag and took 2 bottles full of pigs. Took 2 bottles full of I can't even say it. She opened her bag and took 2 bottles full of pig's blood out. Then Minerva packed away every piece of clothing and things that she wasn't taking with her, and hid the bag in a hole she found, covering it and tying a piece of cloth to a tree branch, so she would recognize it when coming back. Now came the part that she wasn't particularly enthusiastic about. Minerva took a firm grip on her bodice and ripped it. She did the same to her skirt, and opened her hair from the braid, and proceeded to mess it up as well as she could. Then she opened the bottles and poured the blood on herself, making it look like she had been attacked. The blood smelled bad in a way that might have gone off a little on her way there, but she was hoping that she could still pass enough for a dead person to get to the other side. Minerva walked to the river beach and shouted, "Bring a boat! Girl of Tuoni! A raft! A child of Tuonela! Get me over to the strait and reach me across the river." Then she waited. It didn't take long for a girl of Tuoni to arrive with her boat. From afar it seemed like she was an ordinary working girl, with hair under her kerchief and clothes made for working, but the closer she got, the more obvious it became that she was no human girl. Her skin was waxen, and her eyes were circled with dark Her skin was waxen, and her eyes were circled with dark and sunken so deep that Minerva wondered if she had eyes at all. The voice when she spoke was scratchy but strong. "Why does one that isn't killed by any mortal means wants to go to Tuonela?" Minerva swallowed at that and answered, "But I was killed. Don't you see the blood on me, the evidence of a violent death? I have the right to pass, and wish for it also." girl of Tuoni looked at her with such a gaze that made Minerva want to hide, but she suspected that her sham would be brought out to the open. But the girl of Tuoni only nodded, moved aside so that she could get into the boat. For a moment Minerva only stood dumbly, but after she gathered some of her wits, she scrambled in. Part of her hadn't truly believed that the hoax would work, and she doubted that the girl of Tuoni was actually fooled. It might be moderately easy to get into Tuonela, but finding the answer she was looking for and getting back would most likely be far more dangerous and difficult. When the boat hit the shore, she stumbled out as fast as she could and started walking briskly away from the water. The land was as black as the river, and the sky was blood red. The rare trees that stood there were twisted deadwoods, which looked like jutting bones from their near unnatural whiteness. Minerva could also see small houses, or more like shacks, littered in the landscape. When she got closer to one, she saw that it was made of rock, a small hovel that would barely allow for one full-grown man to sleep without hunching. The roof ended below her chin, and the door was just a small hole covered by a piece of cloth. Only way to get in would be to crawl inside. She slowly lifted the cloth and peeked inside. There was a young child sleeping inside, so young that she couldn't say if the child was a boy or a girl. Minerva put the covering back on its place quietly and walked away. It would be best not to disrupt the sleep of the dead, who she had not come for. She looked inside several of the shacks and started to slowly get slightly depressed. There was no way of telling who was sleeping inside of them, and even looking inside wouldn't help if she didn't know what the man she was trying to find actually looked like. It's a weird sentence. She sat down and held her head in her hands and tried to calm down. It would be of no use to get hysterical, and that it would be of no use to get hysterical, that she still had some time until she would have to go back for drink and food and actual rest. Interesting sentence. What are you doing here, child? She might have shrieked a little at that, stood up and quickly turned around. The man who had said the words looked down at her with it's a man. What are you doing here, child? She might have shrieked a little at that, and stood up and quickly turned round. The man who had said the words looked down at her with slightly amused expression. He was an old man, with long white hair and beard, but he held himself in a way that took strength and firm resolve. His eyes shined off intelligence and maybe even a small amount of compassion. Who are you, child, to come to Tuonela while still alive? Minerva felt he actually knew the answers to both of those questions, but asked them anyway. I am Minerva, daughter of Kullervo. I am Minerva, daughter of Kullervo, and Konoki. It's an interesting name. Minerva, the heather, a daughter of the curse-bringer Kullervo, who unknowingly seduced his sister, who then killed herself when she found out about their blood ties. Who killed Ilmarinen's wife, where the curse after she baked a stone in his bread, where his knife then broke. Who slaughtered Utomo's family, then threw himself on his sword. Who grew up as a slave. Minerva grinded her teeth and said, You know my family history rather well, steady old Vainamoinen. Why such an interest? The old man, legendary Vainamoinen, just laughed at that. A child, brought up crookedly, or a son, lulled stupidly, won't come to grasp things, have a man's understanding though he should live, to be old, or should grow strong in body. Minerva nodded at that with a dubious look. It's true that my father had suffered greatly, and brought more pain and suffering to the world with his own hands. But why do you ask? It's odd to see a child of that sibling incest union walk around alive, when her mother threw herself in the water nearly immediately after the act. How do you exist, young Minerva? But steady old Wainamoinen, don't you know where children come from? She didn't really want an answer to that question, as people tended to react badly, or at least treat her differently after they heard the truth. Don't mock me, child. Answer me truthfully, and I will help you find what you are looking for on this land. She sighed a little and answered, My mother threw herself in the river, yes, where fishes ate her flesh, and one salmon devoured her womb. If that had been an ordinary salmon, I may have never been born. But she had once been a human named Aino. At that, the steady old Wainamoinen actually flinched. Minerva smiled at it and kept going. If he wanted answers, she was going to give them to him without easing the words. Yes, the woman given to you, but who rather killed herself than married you, who enters Ahti's kingdom as a fish. I grew her inside her belly, and when I had grown big enough, she changed her shape and gave birth to me on dry land. There I was found and taken into a family. There I grew, until Shaman told the story of my bloodline, and I left for answers and actions that only lie in Tuonela. Steady old Wainamoinen nodded at that. Kulova did unwittingly curse his own bloodline. It didn't matter before, as everyone believed. The line was irredeemably broken. But now, for that you live and the possible children you will have, you must find him to lift it. Yes, that's why. I wish to have a family of my own, with many children, and wish for them and me not to have the same fate as my forebears. Wainamoinen looked amused at that declaration. And have you any suitors? I have 3. One is of my age, but talks of a new religion that comes from far across the sea. Second is a young widow, but with several children with his previous union. Third is an old man. All 3 are equally wealthy. All are very good men, and all equally dear to me, which is very much. The choice is difficult. I know I don't want any of them to face the curse that I carry in my blood, and they won't wait for me forever. I must lift it, and soon. That is why I'm here now. You bring action on this land, where almost everyone sleeps an eternal dream. I do warn you, getting outside will be far harder than entering. Minerva smirked at that. As for leaving, I grew up in a fish's belly, and I have inherited some of the magical powers my father held. I'll be fine. So be it. I know where Kullervo sleeps, but beware. He sleeps restlessly, and death hasn't eased his temper. He won't react kindly for those who wake him. That won't surprise me. Steady old Wainamoinen nodded, and turned around and started walking. Minerva hurried after him, and neither said a word any more. They seemed to walk for hours, but she wouldn't have been surprised if someone would say that the journey actually only lasted for a few minutes. The time in Tuonela moved sluggishly, and still too fast at the same time. Minerva felt no hunger nor thirst, unlike she had feared before. The tiredness was a surprise, and she felt the sluggishness and lethargy slowly gain more strength. She did strongly doubt that if she were to take a nap, she wouldn't wake from it, so she kept pinching herself and forcing her eyes wide open, trying not to fall down to sleep. The gazes steady old Wainamoinen kept throwing at her told Minerva that he knew exactly what she was feeling, but said nothing. She didn't think that he would help her if she were to fall asleep, so she strengthened her attempts to stay awake. "Your father stays here." The stone shack was identical to any others, but when she looked in there, he laid. His face was the same she saw on the surface of the water and in the family heirloom mirror. It was almost uncanny. She let go of the cloth and stood up. When she turned to thank Wainamoinen, the old man had already left. Minerva frowned. She seriously doubted that he had gone afar and would be watching the action. She sighed, bent down to grab a handful of gravel, lifted the cloth and threw the rocks inside, shouting, "Wake up! Your daughter wants to talk to you!" There were sounds of shocked cursing coming from inside, until a man crawled out. He was handsome, with golden hair, and even features that seemed only a couple of years older than her, although he had the look of an angry and depressed man that took away a great deal of his good looks. He glared at her and said, "Are you my daughter?" "Yes." Kullervo looked disgusted at her. "What are you doing here, incest child?" Minerva bristled at that and ignored the stab of hurt that those words brought to her heart. "You cursed our bloodline, unwittingly or not, and I want you to lift it." "No." That was a small surprise. "Why is that?" That That bloodline only brings misery and pain in the world. It spills the blood of the innocents and is completely uncontrollable in a civilized society. Fuck, I can't say S's. In a civilized society, it should fade away. Minerva looked at him, nodded, and pounced at him while punching him in the face. Kullervo didn't even have time to defend himself when she wrapped her hands around his throat, growling, "I do understand that you had a terrible life, that everyone you cared died because of your mistakes, but I won't let you ruin my life too. I grew up in a fish's belly. I was raised by a loving and caring family. I have a future and suitors to choose from. I wish for a family of my own, and I won't let you ruin it. I inherited your magic and my bearer mother's shape, and I will fight to the end for my freedom of you. Release me from the curse." Kullervo punched her into the stomach, forcing her to let go and stroke her nose so hard it broke and started gush. What the fuck is that sentence? I'm sorry. Let me have to read that again. Kullervo punched her into stomach, forcing her to let go and stroke her nose. Oh. So he punched her in the stomach and punched her in the nose, and it broke. Okay. And it started gushing. She howled in pain, cowering, but when he got closer, she sprang forward and headbutting him into the stomach and taking him down with her. After that, things got messy until Kullervo was lying under her and she was screaming in his ear, "Release me! Release me! I will release you." Wait, I have to try that again. "I will. I release you." Those words gave her a rush that left her gasping. It was like her entire life there had been a thin film over her eyes, and now it was suddenly removed. Even in Tuonela, the colors seemed a bit brighter, and the lines sharper. Kullervo used her distraction to his advantage and threw her off his back. Minerva rolled to her feet and raised her hands, waiting for an attack that didn't come. Kullervo just stood, glowering at her. "You got what you wanted. Now leave." Suddenly he smirked and said, "If you can." Minerva took a couple steps backward until she judged that she was far enough, turned around and started running full speed to the shore. There was no one chasing her, but she still jumped into the water at full speed, splashing painfully to the surface, and immediately started to sink. It took her a moment It took a moment for her to get over the shock of how cold the water was, but she managed to gather wits enough to twist into the shape she gained from her bearer mother. As a salmon, she started to swim to the opposite side of the shore, swimming under the net that Tuoni's son made to catch the few living who had gained entry and tried to escape. When she climbed to dry land, she saw that she had come up on the exact spot she had left her bag and started to laugh in joy. After a moment, the laughter changed into sobs of relief. The end, I guess. They never finished the story of what suitor she picked and whatnot. So that's it. If you guys know the origin of the story, I would love to know. And yeah, thank you for listening.